Welcome back to Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life. In this episode, we're joined by JP Singh, a business and tax attorney, former startup founder, neuroscience researcher, and musician. JP shares his journey from growing up in an immigrant household to building a successful legal practice while pursuing diverse passions. We cover AI, mentorship, career strategies, and the power of adding value to create opportunities. Special thanks to our Gen Z contributor this episode, Gray, who discusses his experience with stress in college. If you're a student, entrepreneur, or professional looking for inspiration, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's get started.
Welcome to Found Up Uncharted, your sidekick for life. Season 3, episode 6? Maybe?
It's just yesterday. 6, I think.
I think it's 6. If not, we'll record a 5th one to catch up.
There you go.
Let's start ladies first. Introductions.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Payton. I am an actor, comedian, and podcast person, Natalie, co-host of Uncharted.
Boom. Gotta do that for Leon.
Gotta do it.
And I am Dan Dillard, co-host of Uncharted and also co-founder of Founding Up, amongst other things. And today we've got a good friend of mine, JP. Why don't you introduce yourself and what you do, and we'll dive deep into all things you.
All right. Thank you. Yes, I'm JP Singh. I'm a business and tax lawyer here in the Austin area. I've also been a founder of a startup. I've worked in neuroscience. I'm a musician, so I've done a lot of things. Glad to be here.
I didn't know that you were neuroscience.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And there's a very good mentorship story there. But yeah, I was the first research fellow in the Initiative on Neuroscience and Law at Baylor College of Medicine with a guy named David Eagleman, who just happens to be the host of PBS's The Brain. And
he's
at Stanford now. He was a New York Times best-selling author. And I got that opportunity my first year of law school. And
that is so cool. You stay connected with him?
A little bit. We were thinking about doing a podcast at one point.
Oh, nice.
And I reached out to him and asked if he would be on our podcast. And unfortunately, his schedule's a little bit
tied up.
Books.
Yeah, that happens.
I imagine.
So
that happens. Well, let's currently business attorney, this and that. Always like to start off with, what did you want to be when you were in your teens?
Well, interestingly enough, I've pretty much always wanted to be a lawyer.
There's only been
three people out of all of our. Is it really 3? Or is it 2?
So there's Holly and I think maybe just 2 actually, who knew what they want to be as a kiddo.
Everybody else is like, boom. I thought the architect wanted to be.
Yeah, but then we were technically,
Yeah.
You are an architect now because you build companies.
Very cool. It was just, that is such an interesting fact that you wanted to do that as, you identified that profession as young as, your teens.
Absolutely. I mean, but part of it is, of course, I'm an Indian, and Indian parents, especially immigrant Indian parents, definitely encourage their kids to either be doctors, lawyers, and usually that's about it.
Yes. These are the 2 things you can be.
Yeah.
These are the 2 things you can be. So, I was encouraged. I had a lot of natural predispositions to it when I was young. I remember
negotiated for sleepovers. And
well, I mean, to some extent, I wasn't much of an arguer, but I did like to debate philosophically from a very young age.
That's cool.
And so that really went a long way. And also just language skills. That was always my strength, language skills. I remember I took something in about 4th grade. I took a special class with the district attorney where they taught young kids who were interested in the law about law. In the 4th grade.
Cool.
It was good.
And this is in Alabama.
This was in Alabama, yeah. They actually have some professional things going on in Alabama. Huntsville, Alabama is where I'm from, which is it's a fantastic town. It's ranked up there, I think, beyond Austin in terms of quality of life these days.
Wow. Yeah. That's really cool. One of my other friends lives in Huntsville.
Huntsville, Alabama?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's a small world.
He lived here and always had roots back there, and he moved back. So that was really cool. Yeah. So you always wanted to do that. And so I guess the track was not easy, but you're like, I know what I want to do and be that. So many individuals, it's just this life journey of like trying to figure it out. However, I know that even though that you went down this profession route, that there's still kind of desires for you to, like what you said, do different things, like musician, like music, and you did startup, and you've done neuroscience, so you've kind of dabbled in a lot of things.
Absolutely. I mean, doing something like the law, if you can manage it, obviously helps support doing a lot of other things. Those skills can be applied in a whole lot of different industries. I worked with a lot of startups, so I was able to take that knowledge when I wanted to start my own company. You know, I had the resources to be able to learn how to be a DJ, to pay for my own studio time when I was doing recording music. And so, you know, I was blessed in that respect.
That is smart. You get a career that you can like maintain yourself financially, and then you can invest in yourself.
Absolutely.
Not having to rely on anybody else.
That's one of the things that Leon and I talk about whenever because people have different passions. For example, being a teacher. And some of these professions on the opposite side of being an attorney don't pay as much, right? So you're like, I really have the passion to go do this thing, but it won't support lifestyle I actually want. So then part of the idea is, why don't you go do some things like an attorney or something else that does give you the time and resources to then go do something that you really care about. So just pretty much what you've said. So.
That's exactly right. I mean, but one of the problems and the trade-offs is always, you know, people will come out with student loans. You're losing 3 years of potential earning to sacrifice for a professional career.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of people who have to do the student loan route, I mean, you have a mortgage for the rest of your life. So there's give and takes to all these things that we do. The fact is, the guys I know who made the most money, actually, a lot of them didn't go to college and they went the entrepreneurial route. You know?
Sure.
And
like,
so,
but they're not lawyers.
No, not lawyers. I mean, a lot of these guys did things like learning digital marketing and search engine optimization and things like that, and then applying that in different industries. And then a lot of people also in sales. You know, you don't need necessarily a 4-year degree to get into sales. And people who are good at sales, regardless of the industry, they make a great living.
Yeah, great living for sure. 100%. So let's talk about mentorship. Like, how has mentorship impacted you from, you know, through the decades of life? So when you were a kid, and how did you have some of these people impact you and your decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question because, you know, I'm blessed that a few specific mentor relationships really provided a huge amount of value for me and essentially helped pave my entire way through life. And they've also taught me some good lessons about how to leverage mentors correctly. The first one would have been the relationship I had with Professor John Mixon, who was a professor at the University of Houston Law Center. And I do want to note that since I did do a traditional educational route, early on, these mentors were almost always professors. Right. And I view that relationship with a professor as a huge resource if you know what you're looking for there. And, you know, what I found with Professor Mixon was I was just a student that he immediately identified as someone who actually cared and was very engaging with him. And by engaging with a professor, you're adding a huge amount of value because it makes their classes so much more interesting for them. We know that using good questions solicits good answers and critical thinking. So the students who are out there actually wide-eyed and questioning, challenging the professor, that actually adds value to the professor. And so with him in particular, he found me to be very engaging. We developed a relationship, and he's the one who introduced me to David Eagleman, this world-class neuroscientist who was founding this new initiative on neuroscience and law. And Eagleman, I ended up taking a extracurricular class that he was teaching, and immediately a few weeks into that class, Professor Mixon called me into his office, and they were both sitting there ready to offer me a job that year.
Wow.
Without having to do much work. It was just a matter of me being there, adding some value, demonstrating competence.
Being hungry.
And the opportunity presented itself.
And did you take the job?
Oh, yeah, I took it. I was there. I was the first research fellow in that initiative at Baylor College of Medicine for about a year. Wow. Obviously, neuroscience is a fascinating field, but I was a lawyer and I loved business. And I knew I was ultimately going to be a lawyer. So after a year, I decided, okay, I got to get back on my career path. Taking a year off and doing something completely unusual, to me, it added a huge amount of value. I mean, not only is it a resume builder, great relationships and just intellectual growth, but I did recognize to get on my actual career path, that's not something I could sit around doing for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
I needed to get back focused and get another position.
It's like his version of a gap year.
It activated another part of his brain,
Right.
which is amazing. Or I just love that idea. What you said, though, I want to touch on, because I hadn't really thought about this, but content actually, it gets smarter. And when I heard that from one of our advisors. His name is John, who's this media content guy, right? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? It's like, think about this professor, year one, 300 students, or let's call it 100 students. And that content that he's presenting year one actually gets smarter by the questions that are being asked.
Sure.
So the people that are pushing back. And so the professor will go and adapt that content for year two. And so by the end of 10 years, it's not the same content you had for year one.
Right.
It should be 1,000 times smarter if you've got that engagement.
Absolutely.
So
That's a cool way to put it.
well, I had never thought about that,
Yeah.
but your content is always getting smarter. And so the more that you engage, and I point this out because of our audience today, the audience that we're reaching out to, Gen Z, one of the messaging that I'm getting whenever I go speak to professors today versus, and I speak to one of our advisors to the company is a professor out of A&M, and he's been there for not at A&M for 50 years, but he's been teaching for 50 years. And he sees the difference in questions that are being asked and almost the disinterest. And so a lot of the things that are available, so some of the challenges that institutions have is how do we make content more engaging to current audiences? Because it is evolved to a point where, and people have evolved to a point where I can get all of what I need right here. And now I'm sitting through a lecture that I just cannot hold my attention to. So it's important why I wanted to tie this together with what you said. It's important that no matter what that content looks like, for you to engage, for you to be like, all right, this may be not super interesting, but how can I, one, look at this professor as a mentor, and two, how can I question this content to make it more engaging? Because it's the participation you put into it that's going to benefit you and the group. So I just, as you're saying that, I was like, oh, that's a great point to make about today's content.
Definitely.
So more about some mentorship. So that was one of the stories. And
Sure. I mean, so as I was describing, I knew that I needed to get back on my appropriate professional track. And in doing what I did next, I demonstrate what I'll describe my kind of 3-point formula here, which is to add value, demonstrate competence, and ask for what you want. And so there was one professor in particular, Professor Ira Shepard. I had taken 2 of his classes. Once again, I was very engaging with him, so we had a relationship. I added that value to his course. I demonstrated my competence so that me then going to ask him for something like I'm about to tell you about, he felt comfortable in facilitating that because he knew leveraging his social and professional capital for me was not putting him at risk. He was actually putting someone out there that would demonstrate competence.
Exactly.
Make him look good also.
And so what I did with him was I literally asked him if I could take him out to breakfast. I brought a list of firms that I was interested in, and he literally went through and he said, call this guy at this firm, call this guy at this firm, just told me specifically who to talk to and tell him I sent you. And that led to my first associate position. I was a law clerk first. I became an associate. I stayed there until I became a partner and then ultimately have my own practice now.
Wow.
How did you know to even do that? Like, that is so forward thinking, out of the box thinking. And it, like, when you hear it, it sounds like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But no, that took a lot of initiative and a lot of calculation and strategy before you executed.
Well, it's one of those things. It took a lot of risk too. You have to have the confidence to ask for what you want. Right. But I feel like once you've added some value and demonstrated competence, you're right in the position to ask for what you want. Now, the fact is, if someone tells you no, you can still ask, and what you should be asking for is feedback. why is it that you don't view me as someone you could help? I think there's probably a little bit more political way to put that,
Sure.
but to just solicit some feedback. I know someone recently who they're in the medical profession and they were working at a particular physician's practice, and they asked us for a recommendation, and the physician said no. And fortunately, he did ask, and he got some very painful but important feedback. Because if you don't get that feedback, you're going to continue to make these mistakes that can completely derail your professional path.
Right.
But the other example, just to finish that story of asking for what I wanted and giving value, I also I took advantage of opportunities to be both a teaching assistant and a research assistant. So once again, here you've shown your competence to these people, and now you're adding a huge amount of value. You're making their teaching job and their research, which is one of the most important things that professors do, making it easier. And I did that. And then I asked for what I wanted. Namely, I wanted letters of recommendation. Mm-hmm. So I got a letter of recommendation, for example, from a nationwide leading constitutional lawyer. And he says in that letter that I was the best research assistant he'd ever worked with. Wow. So I demonstrated that competence. I added that value, and I asked for what I wanted, and he went above and beyond what I would have dreamed he would have given me by giving me that kind of a compliment when he was as well known as he was. Yeah. And I then took that around and used it when I was meeting these partners at law firms looking for the right position. That was a huge amount of value I got back.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love that messaging. And once again, I want to point this out for the audience because this is a formula. This is a formula.
That he's able to declare and explain so simplistically. There are 3 steps.
3 steps. Here's a formula. At the end of the day, what I get the most of, and I've said this before, a lot of times, if you don't stop and think big picture, what you see your neighbors are doing potentially is like, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? That is a standard thing that easily you can fall into that category. But in order for you the secret of success, in order for you to find a purpose in life is, how can I provide value to someone else? Mm-hmm. That's what's going to pay you. Because you can't pay yourself if you don't have anything to offer. But if you have something to offer to someone else and make that life easier for them, and the more that you do this, the more value you provide for someone else, the more you can ask for things, whether that's monetarily or letters of recommendation or whatever that next step is. But it's always giving first. And so I really love that you're like, I've got this formula. Here are the things that need to happen. Developing a relationship, asking, knowing what you want, developing a relationship, and just having this game plan of I'm going to do this first. I'm not going to ask first. The first thing you didn't do is go ask. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. It's let me go show up. Let me give them and become this, whatever is needed as far as this value. And once I feel that you've done that, then I can do the ask,
right?
Which is really cool.
Yeah, that's the way it works, or at least that's how it worked for me.
Well, and it's how it's worked for me, and having the gray hair, being in life a little longer than either of you, that's the secret. That is, when you've asked me before, how do you develop relationships? How do you keep these relationships? Well, I'm always trying to provide value. Another thing that you mentioned is you were able to ask for those recommendations because you felt comfortable, because you'd already developed a relationship. And so developing a relationship costs me nothing. If I've identified this person as someone that I want is part of my network, going to coffee, having lunch, asking inquisitive questions, asking how to help, and being true to that, it's not a big cost. It is one of those things that it is part of just life and growth and all the above. You just never know what's going to happen, what they'll introduce you to at the right time, whenever it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and it's often better than you ever expected.
Always is. That's what I've just been pleasantly surprised by. I knew this person, and boom, it's just this open door that you would have never imagined, because our imaginations are kind of limited until you go through some experience. And even now, as many great things that I can look back and say, all these great things have happened. And now I just expect great things to happen. But I don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that my imagination goes so far, but then whenever that door opens, it's like, whoa, it's much, much bigger. And it's a nice Becky Henderson. I know you've met her. I'm not sure if you have, but I'll introduce you to her. Has been my life coach for like 6 years. And she said something a few years ago that says, life is like a movie that you haven't seen yet. And what I like about that is that you don't want to have a movie that you've seen before, because you know what's coming next. But this really exciting movie that's just kind of unfolding and is always having surprises. I love just that analogy because you leave room for that movie to evolve and do its thing versus like I have to plan every single thing. And often it's not going to happen that way anyway. So
Right.
that's where you get stuck.
Yeah. For me, I'm one of those weirdos who will watch the same movies and show over and over. And I guess that plays into why I'm so good at, living this Groundhog Day of professional life. You know what I mean? You just got to get up every day and grind.
Yeah.
But if you like what you're doing,
Right.
you'll live that Groundhog Day well.
Yeah.
No, JP, I want to ask you something else because you mentioned your parents are immigrants. So you're first generation?
Yes.
Okay. That also shows like an incredible amount of confidence that you had to foster or build over time, like to have the wherewithal and the self-belief being a first generation person and from an immigrant family. Like, how did your parents help foster that or develop that?
Sure. I would say my dad in particular was just a very competent man. He was very, very intelligent. He worked for all the big aerospace companies. And so he was very competent. And then as Indian immigrants, we value and emphasize education highly. So even before you know to believe in yourself, you're taught just to study and learn. That's your job.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was a natural born, I'm an American idealist.
Sure.
I believe in America. I believe in freedom, and I believe in the opportunities that we have here. And that's just something I've had most of my life.
Everybody has a right to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's here for the taking. We're spoiled rotten in this country.
Yeah.
We really are.
You have any favorite mentors that you like to think about? Or what about today? Do you mentorship or do you see that? How does that impact you today?
Sure. I mean, this is a very important thing for professionals, right? So when let's say you're a doctor or a lawyer and you're in a hospital or a firm, you're going to have kind of a built-in mentorship structure because you have all these older residents and partners and you're working with them. So you need some guidance, you go to them. Now, where I'm at in my career is I have my own practice. I'm still a relatively young guy, though. I have plenty of experience, but I still need to be able to bounce things off of other experienced people. So you need to have that network of relationships, whether they're mentors, friends, co-counsel on different things that you can just go to just when you need to bounce things off. Here's a unique situation. Here's the strategy I'm formulating. What would be your counter argument? Now, I'll tell you, and this plugs right into what you guys are doing. I do use these AI tools now. And in many respects, if you can't get somebody on the phone to bounce some ideas around, the AI tools are incredibly powerful to bounce things around with. Yep. We have a number of AI tools that are built specifically for lawyers that are making things much easier. But, without a doubt, when you can't get that other guy on the phone, having these tools now to have a conversation with is incredibly powerful.
It is.
I had an experience this morning. Through one of the other companies that I work with in finance, we were doing some short video clips this morning, and they were just random questions that were being asked of one of the other advisors. And I was working on the back end doing my other thing, but I was overhearing what was going on. And every time that question would be asked and the advisor would answer the question, I'd go, I would just I would have answered that different. I would and I'm just older and I've been in it longer. But immediately afterwards, one of the conversations I had is like, if we can have those questions ahead of time, and if you could go ask AI, because AI is going to have the problem that some of us have, and this happens to every one of us, is that we speak a language based on what we see every single day. And so we don't have the empathy to talk to our audience all the time, or we don't put ourselves in those shoes all the time. Whereas when you ask an AI, act as if I'm 21 or so and asking these questions, the AI will naturally put it into different contexts, different storytelling, make it simpler to understand. And so
That's true.
It benefits you. It benefits you to just let me I know the answer, but let me run these questions through this system so that I can give a different perspective.
Absolutely.
And then answer that. So part of technique that we'll be going forward is that's a adjustment that's going to happen. And truly, AI makes us better. It's like using a calculator. Like,
Right.
why not check your work? Using a computer, why not do this? It is some of these tools that I find I use it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And ultimately, they end up training you. Like using spell check ends up training you to be a better speller, for example. Using the calculator probably helps you do math quicker in your head eventually.
When it comes to AI, well, I'm going to yes and no, right? It makes you better at certain things. Innovation, for example. I am a much better at asking questions because I know that the better I ask a question to the AI, the better answer I'll get.
Yeah.
Does not make me a better speller because I know that AI's got my back.
Yeah.
Right? Very similar to whenever we all used to, you may not remember this, but we used to remember everybody's phone numbers back in the day.
I remember that. I still remember my home phone number as a kid.
I have a few numbers that are still there, but we don't have to do that anymore. And it's just, you got to practice. You don't need it. It's all saved in your phone. So there's certain things you don't need to do anymore. But yeah. So one of the things I've not become a better speller because of these tools.
Sure.
Because I know that I can just throw a close enough word and it's going to understand me. But where my focus and genius is coming into that is how can I ask the most precise question to get the most precise answer, to get the better answer than anything else. And I think that's a skill that many people are going to have to, as they're starting to learn AI, just the better the question, the better the outcome will be.
Right.
Yeah. So my understanding is that we have a finite cognitive bandwidth, right? There's only so much information we can handle and so much we can process. And so, yeah, I can't remember any phone numbers except my childhood phone number, but I also don't need to.
Right.
And I can communicate so much more quickly and allocate that cognitive bandwidth to other things. I think it was Albert Einstein who they were asking him to run some calculation and he was like, I could never run that calculation. You know, I don't remember how to do that stuff.
Right.
I don't need to keep it in my mind. I can look it up. It's in a book.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just like the law. I don't necessarily remember all the statutes in the state of Texas. I'm going to look it up in a database or something like that. It wouldn't be to my value to try to remember all of that as opposed to know how to utilize the tools that exist. I think a lot of it is a lot of competence is not so much about being able to do everything, but being able to properly utilize the tools at your disposal.
And be efficient.
Absolutely.
It's knowing enough to know that there's an answer out there. Like, I remember something about this. I got to go look this up because there's details that I need to go back to do. So I use that all the time.
My friends and I don't really have much tolerance for conversations where it's like, what was the name of that guy who was, he starred in that movie with the other actor? It's like, look it up. You're wasting my time. Look it up. Anything you can Google, don't waste my time trying to recall it in your head right in front of you while you're holding your phone.
Have you seen that app, Let Me Google This For You?
No.
Oh, it's somebody asks you a question in a text message, for example, and you can send them a link to Let Me Google This For You, and it shows them a video of going to Google, putting the answer in,
something
and then zooming in on the first response with the answer.
The only people
Let me
I have
Google this for you.
The only people I have that patience for is my parents, right?
That's funny.
I still get my dad sometimes. Will you order this on Amazon for me? I'm like, sure.
That's true.
I'll do it for you.
No worries.
I'll make sure that happens. But yeah, I remember Mom would always like, can you Google this for me? And I don't know what it was, but it was just like, yeah, I'll go do that for you. But again, I think it comes down to the better answers, right? Because there's certain ways that you do look up stuff and you come up with a much more defined answer, much more thorough answer. And I think people will appreciate. So it is asking those better questions.
Absolutely. I mean, as I was mentioning earlier, the quality of the questions, increases the quality of the answers as well as the thought processes. And dealing with these tools, these AI tools, especially, I find if what you put in is going to help generate what you get out. And if you actually have a conversation with it, define parameters, if you define perspectives, it is giving you such a good refined product when you use it.
And the ability to know when something's not right. So it's like, that's not exactly what I want. And I'm not sure I'm going to go fact check this and then just like go going deeper.
Well, you absolutely have to do that. We have some interesting case law right now of lawyers who have been disbarred and things of that nature because they essentially allowed AI to write briefs for them.
Wow.
And, it makes things up.
Wow.
So it made up all this law that wasn't true, didn't exist, and they just
didn't check
plugged it in without checking it. And then the judge, you've essentially lied to the judge, and you can't say, I blame the AI. No, that's what you put in writing. You signed that.
I heard a follow-up story from Leon about this, and I don't have the sources for you here. I'd asked him, but he essentially said that what they found, not that AI doesn't make mistakes because it does hallucinate, does things, and it's gotten a lot better at not doing that. However, on some of these cases, JP, the AI cited stuff that was on the internet. And so it had made it through the system at some point. And so since it knows all of this stuff, it's going to go grab that. But it wasn't, the mistakes were found, but it was found through the AI. It was at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, AI actually had some of these things. It was bad information, but it pulled it off of some human that put it on the internet as bad information. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is.
That is.
So we're getting fact checked.
It's going to get better. The algorithms for, determining truth and validating, information that comes into the large language model is just getting better by the day. But right now, the thing still makes a lot of mistakes.
So fast, though. Things are changing so fast. It's like you look at when computers first came out, and then you'd wait like 18 months, and you'd have a newer version is twice as fast, twice as small, twice as less. Half the cost. And that was, I forget what the name of that, Moore's Law. That's what that was called. And but now it's like daily. Oh, this company did this. Now this company did this. Now this company did this. Like, whoa.
Bibliographies. Do you remember how much time we used to spend making bibliographies and citing? And then they came up with a website where you could just stick in the author, stick in the book, stick in the year of publication, and then it generated it for you.
I do feel for educators though now, because so much is so easy to cheat on.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Aren't there softwares that check for that too, if AI was used or not?
Yeah, they have not been reliable.
Really?
Just because it is, it's the whole cat and mouse thing. I always remember back in the day whenever I was a big proponent of started driving and had a lead foot, and I would buy the radar detectors, and then the police would have a certain kind of detector, and before you know it, this technology was better than this technology.
Young man.
I would upgrade. Like, I was spending hundreds of dollars on this stuff because I would upgrade because I didn't want to get caught. I was not going to slow down.
I drive like a grandma, everybody. So I don't get
well,
pulled
I
over.
drive like a grandpa today, but it's not for the reason of speeding tickets. It's more because I was replacing the tires on my truck and they were so expensive. I'm like, yeah, maybe I should just slow down. I'll give myself more time.
Yeah.
At some point I got wise with that. But the whole thing was I saw this competitive, cat and mouse thing that just kept, finally the policeman had a laser, and then you had to get the laser, and then that wasn't as reliable. But my secret today, not that I use it because I don't like to speed that much, but it's Waze, because Waze tells you now. It's
what the speed
crowdsourcing. No, it's not. Other people in the crowd that are using Waze will tell you where the police are at.
Oh, right.
And so that's outperformed any of the direct technology that you carried in your car. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I just never speed anymore.
Yeah.
Cruise control for the win.
Right?
Right. Because you just give yourself enough time. But it's this whole cat and mouse thing. So I think, to your point, there's this technology that says, oh, we can tell if it's AI, and then AI gets better, and like, oh, no, you can't. And then so I just kind of think that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, I think the tools that they have, which they've had for years, for like plagiarism detection, are very good. But the thing about AI is that the narrative an AI generates is not published anywhere.
Right.
So they're not going to be able to check what that source is.
Right.
My understanding is it's not really even repeating the same language that it uses to answer the same question.
Right.
You can ask it the same question, it'll formulate that in completely two different narratives. So it's powerful.
Yeah. A couple questions for you, Jay, before we move on. Just for the audiences. Oh, I guess since we're on the AI, before I jump out of the AI question, you being an attorney, how do you see the threat of AI for the profession?
I really don't believe it's going to be a threat because the legal profession is a human-centric profession. It involves so much communication, human presence, human relationship. You can't replace that. I think it's only going to help. I think it's only going to help because it makes our jobs easier and it makes us more efficient. Now, where it could impact is, yes, it could shrink the market, especially for entry-level positions. When you used to have these big law firms who were doing, large corporate litigation and having all these armies of attorneys doing document review, but now you have the complex systems where you just plug in all the documents and it's keyword searchable and it'll automatically do an analysis for you. Over time, that's going to get better. So I do see a shrink in terms of entry-level opportunity, but the profession itself will never go away, in my opinion.
I also think that it's probably going to get better because this, data in, data out, right? So you get better access to data. So now you got AI helping you get stuff that would have taken someone else to go look. And there's just more efficiency in the extent of the data that's being brought. So instead of having the research assistant that's going to go look for these things, they're going to find some things. They may not find some other things, but they'll bring you something. And now you have AI that can go get you anything that's on the internet, brings it back. And so now you've got a much more concise thing. So I just think that better outcomes potentially. And I see that not only for attorneys, but I see that for many professions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of products. I don't know if I should be mentioning specific products on here, but there's Spellbook AI and Lexis AI that I use. That the fact is, they just alleviate the need, unfortunately, for a lot of associate assistants, and they just make things so much easier. Yeah. They require, but at the end of the day, that's in service of the client, because if you're saving time, getting things done better, that's to everyone's value and everyone's benefit.
We can always call those companies and say we advertised on our podcast.
Exactly.
Where's our sponsorship?
Exactly. Paid partnership. Yeah.
So my second question I had for you. Because we have people trying to figure out what they want to do in life, what's a day in the life of your work look like? Like you enjoy it. What's the talent? What does a day in life look like? Yeah, let's just imagine you've got an 18-year-old across the room and considering becoming an attorney. What would you say to them?
Well, so first of all, I have to qualify it by saying that I'm spoiled rotten in the sense that I work for myself, and I have developed a book of business and a way of going about business that gives me a huge amount of flexibility and freedom. But this comes with the responsibility. There's nobody, overseeing me. There's nobody I have to answer to other than my client. So I work all the time. I'm available all the time. 24/7, I'm a professional, and people call me, text me constantly. So I'm on all the time. But if I want to work remotely from my mom's house in Alabama for an extended period of time, I can go do that. If I want to go, I have a place up in Arkansas. If I want to go stay up there and work remotely, I can do that. I can control where I need to be. Now, obviously, if you got to be in court, you got to be in court. But on the average given day, I can work from basically anywhere I want with a laptop and a cell phone. Right. And that's a huge blessing. Obviously, in the older days, we had paper files. I don't deal with paper files and documents at all for the most part. Obviously, you get original documents and correspondence. You got to hold on to it. So, my day is pretty simple. It's, work out in the morning, be available whenever people need me, and make sure I'm delivering on whatever schedule I want to work on. Now, it's at the end of the day, one of the things my clients love about me is how fast and responsive I am. A lot of lawyers get fired because they just drag their feet on things for a very long period of time and they don't respect people's time. I don't do that. I pride myself on not doing that. So a lot of people couldn't handle the way I work either, because a lot of people have this concept of unplugging. For me, there is no unplugging, but that's not something that is to my detriment. I enjoy that. I enjoy being there for people, and it's fun. My job is fun to me, but you have to be prepared to be on.
I really like that you put it that way. Your job is fun. There's I forget who says it. I remember reading this on a post recently, but if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Absolutely.
And I live that way. Like So, and as you've experienced, sometimes those texts on weekends and all kinds of things. And I tell everyone that works with me, I don't expect answers during these crazy hours. It's just, I have a thought, got to get it out, and I got to go. Or I've got a question that's got to get answered.
He works really well between 2 and 3 a.m. He wakes up and he's like on fire, and then his brain can go back to sleep.
If you're going to do that, what you're supposed to do is just draft it, save it in the draft folder, and then send it at a reasonable hour. So people don't think you're crazy.
My phone's on silent, so it doesn't bother me.
That's the other side of it, is I just make sure to have your phones on silent at night, because these might come over. I have looked for apps that do that just, especially because my whole thing is I just don't want to forget about sending this thing.
Mixmax is a great one.
Mixmax? I'll try it. Works
I have
with iPhone?
8 calendars that I made.
So you work with iPhone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But the other thing is, if you're not prepared to be available at all these crazy times, and if you're not prepared to manage the thoughts and ideas that you have, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur or have your own business. You should be an employee that has bounded hours, has your fixed vacation schedule, and you can be happy in that. Now, if you're going to take on one of these other types of positions of ownership over what you're doing, I think you just have to be prepared for more time.
Well, and to the audience, that speaks to who you are as an individual, right? So my entire team, we have this conversation day one. It's like, this is who I am. We're running 3 or 4 things. And so we're always doing things. Now, I don't expect certain things. I respect your time. You go do your thing. There'll be communication that comes at all kinds of things. This is what I do. And just have that really clear communication. What I find, though, is a lot of the staff is entrepreneurial too. So they'll be like, well, they'll respond to me. Not that I want them to, but they're also kind of working in this mode of like, they're passionate about what we're building, so on and so forth. So I think that's a good for some people to that find that passion, and if they really believe in what they're doing, why not? If you really don't love what you do, then maybe take that time out.
Absolutely,
for sure. All right, let's see if is there any, before I jump into this, any other mentorship stories that we missed? I didn't want to.
No, I mean, we talked about how I got to some of the main roles I got and main opportunities, and how that supports my current practice. So I think we've covered it.
All right. Well, we've got time for 1, maybe 2 of these videos, and I'm going to see. Let's talk about college and stress, because I think this kind of relates to what we were just talking about. Because I'm not stressed, you're not stressed when we kind of live what we do, but stress can be seen as it can affect different people different ways. So let's see what Gray has to say about stress.
Right now in this moment, what do you struggle with the most?
Stress. At college, I really don't have much time, and I feel like I'm still wasting my time. Like when I'm walking to class, I feel like I should be listening to something like a lecture when I'm wasting my time. Like, why am I only doing one thing right now?
Why do you think this happens? That you have these intrusive thoughts?
It's because I'm not satisfied with where I'm at. I don't want to be a college student forever. It's great going out and partying and hanging out with friends, but I feel that I'm stressed because I'm not where I want to be. I haven't defined my success yet. I haven't gotten to a point where I can look back and say I'm proud of where I got to. I still want to keep going. I think that's why. It's because I'm not there yet.
I can identify with that. Have you had that feeling before?
I just think about that college stress as something that should be manageable if you're just sleeping and exercising a little bit. If you can't handle college stress, you're going to have some real problems in the workplace. I mean, you have to grow through that stress and learn those, coping mechanisms and behaviors to manage it.
Yeah. I heard something different, though. He was not complaining about the college load. He was looking inside and saying, I got a lot more to give, and I don't know where I'm at there, and I'm not there yet. So it's almost an anxiety, not a stress. So I have this anxiety of like, I'm not doing enough. What else can I be doing right now? I just want to get there now, right? So I would say I've been there. I understand that exact feeling of like, there is no there. It's not, when you understand that there's no there's just there's just small improvements. There's just these micro improvements you do. Like, look at what you're doing today and what can I do today to improve my tomorrow? And, meditation and just kind of, I'll go back to what Becky said, and I've read this in a meme as well, which is funny, but essentially we're in this thing called, we're on a rock that's rotating every day, and it's rotating around a sun.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not going anywhere. It's just this thing that we're just doing this on. And so for us to put that anxiety in ourselves, like I've got to be doing it, like I've got to be racing. You can slow down and be more methodical and also just pay attention to your needs. Because as I think a lot of what happens there, just from personal experience, is you're living in your head, and we all live in our head, but you're living in this, like, I've got to be doing these things. And when you are in this space that you're creating this anxiety in your mind, some other things that might be not being taken care of is the body, the other needs like your nutrition and your exercise and all the things that you pointed out. But also just kind of allowing yourself to have some deeper thoughts. I will point back to just the phone and social media and some of the things that cause some of these anxieties. We've mentioned this in the show before, is sometimes the reason that you don't feel like you're enough is because you're seeing all these other people do certain things, and that's causing these anxieties. But if you're able to like quiet that down and just kind of look deeper, it'll calm some of these things.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I would encourage Gray in that, like, I remember being at NYU and having to be super present and remind myself, like, I'm only going to be in college once, so enjoy it. I had some people in my class that had to drop out, take like a medical personal leave of absence because they couldn't show up to class on time. Like, we would stay out late, but I was always at my 8 a.m. class. I knew that the number one thing was to show up, because I did the calculations and every single class cost me $4,000. So I wasn't going to waste that money by not showing up. So even if you're hungover or whatever you're doing or exhausted, show up to class, 1. And 2, remember what a beautiful, protective, wonderful bubble you're in during college. Like, I did work during college, but I really didn't have financial concerns. I wasn't paying for my own rent. I had a full academic scholarship to NYU, and I still worked. But the point is, I was in this time of my life that I was able to go to class. It was a privilege to learn. I was able to explore New York City. And I worried about what am I going to do in my career and how am I going to achieve all this? But I still was able to appreciate the fact that this is my time in college. And for anybody who's questioning what I said, because I did calculate the cost of the class, I went abroad for 1 year and I had to lose my scholarship because it was so important for me, because I was the only student that got accepted to this Australia program out of 2,000 that applied. So I had to take away my last year of scholarship. But now NYU and NIDA have a relationship and they do cross credit. So you're welcome for paving the way. But anyway,
really,
it's
really cool. I think the message here is just be present, right?
Yeah.
Be present with the opportunity to understand. And an analogy that I like, sometimes we're planting the seed and we like dig it up to like, I want to see what the seed's going to grow, and then nothing's
keep
there.
Checking on it.
Keep checking. So you got to plant the seed and you got to give it that space and time to grow, and that season. And so I understand the anxiety, Gray, but just take it one day at a time. Enjoy the present.
Yeah.
If I can just add one thing to that, that anxiety of not, or feeling that you should be doing more, or that there is more, or where you're going, that kind of thing. To me, that's a sign that we should be working on our intentionality. There's the mindfulness aspect, and then there's the intentionality aspect, because you can be a Buddha who is just sitting in your chair, or you can be the Buddha in the world, so to speak, who's making things happen. So we have to do that work with ourselves to figure out what are our intentions and our visions. I was huge into that for a number of years, and I attribute so much of my personal well-being and success to having done that work, to have tried to always define what am I doing today for, and how does it fit in to this bigger vision. Okay. I think that could really help address some of that anxiety.
Well, and also by relabeling it, as you were speaking, I just want to say back to Gray, I would call that hunger, right? and it's okay to be hungry. I'd rather you be hungry, or you're in a better position by being hungry than one that's like doesn't care, right? Because there is the other side of that coin where people, but if you're hungry and you want to be more, that's a really good sign. So just kind of be present, be the global Buddha, and just be hungry.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Well, I think that's it for today. That's our time. Thanks very much for being on the show. Really enjoyed your commentary and your perspective, especially the formula.
That was so good. So wait, let me repeat it so we can sum it up. So it's add value, display competency, and then ask for what you want.
Absolutely. It worked for me.
Love it. Thanks, JP.
Thank you guys. It was great.
Huge thanks to JP Singh for sharing his experiences and wisdom on mentorship, career growth, and navigating life's opportunities. If there's one takeaway from this conversation, it's JP's 3-step formula. Add value, demonstrate competence, and ask for what you want. A game changer for anyone looking to level up in their career. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Also, connect with us on our social media to share your thoughts and let us know what resonated with you the most. If you would like to participate as a guest or are a Gen Z with questions, find out more details in our show notes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay uncharted.